I've been negotiating cloud contracts for over 20 years. Here are the top things I think that you need to focus on in your software contract negotiation. My name is Marcus Harris. I focus my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related agreements and litigating failed software projects in courts across the country. I've negotiated thousands of SaaS contracts in my career. The key points that you need to focus on are the warranty issues, privacy, security, definitional issues associated with what you're licensing from a software solution perspective, limitations of liability, pricing issues, and termination. With respect to warranties, really warranties are both a warranty of time and it's a warranty of reference. You want to have an understanding of what that technology solution is supposed to do and what that vendor is guaranteeing that it will do. Typically, warranties are going to point to something that is outside of the contract, and it's going to point to some objective standard, which would be something like software documentation. It would be mutually agreed upon specifications or generally accepted industry standards. The issue of time is important because when does that warranty run? Does it run from the date that you have signed the contract? If so, you may be left out in the cold, because if it takes you a year and a half to integrate that software and to go live, and the warranty only lasts for 3 to 6 months, you have no ability to exercise your rights under that warranty when you've actually started utilizing the software. When you're negotiating these contracts, you have to pay attention to issues surrounding privacy. You want to have an understanding of what data you are sharing in the context of that technology platform. Is it customer data? Is it your employee data? Is it personally identifiable information? All of that becomes incredibly important with respect to data security. You need to have an understanding of both the data that you're sharing and critically what the vendor's best practices are with respect to the protection of important and critical data. You want to make sure that there is a definitional framework in the agreement that is specific and really defines with a high level of exactness, what you are licensing. You want that description to be accurate. It needs to be robust. It can't just be the broad generalization of the name of the software, SAP HANA, for example. It needs to be, SAP HANA version 3.5. You want to make sure that the contract sets forth with specificity the functionality that you're licensing, any key requirements that you have for that piece of functionality need to be detailed, and any performance metrics for that software should also be identified in the contract. You want to make sure that the definitional framework is comprehensive enough to encompass things like upgrades, updates, bug fixes. What are you getting in connection with software? Is the software that you're licensing and the fee that you're paying for that software, is it comprehensive? Are you getting updates to the software? Are you getting maintenance? Are you getting support? You just need to have an understanding of what you are licensing in general. Limitation of liability is a huge issue in every one of these contracts. You want to make sure that the limitation of liability is reasonable, that it's mutual, that it's keyed towards some objective metric. For example, the fees that you have paid under the contract. There's a variety of variations on how you can implement that. I mean, it can be, like I said, total fees for the duration of the term. It can be the total fees that you have paid to the vendor in the 6 months prior to the issue giving rise to the claim for damages. There's a variety of ways to do it, but you want to make sure that there's a limitation of liability, certainly for yourself, and certainly the vendor's going to want to make sure that they've got one. You also need to think about including certain carve-outs from that cap on liability, and what I mean by that is, if there is a data breach or a data incident, you don't necessarily want that to be subject to the cap on the liability at fees paid or a subset of fees paid. You want to consider including in your contract what we would call super caps that are going to be able to take into account the higher liability associated with certain types of breaches, so that you can make sure that you've got a meaningful remedy in the event that you have to litigate under that contract. You want to take into account things like price increases, future options. I typically tell my clients, you have no better position with respect to leverage and being able to negotiate with your software vendor than you do before you have signed the contract. Because once you sign the contract, you're not going to get anything. And depending on how much money you're spending and what kind of functionality you're licensing or purchasing, that's going to dictate how much leverage and how much negotiation power you have. But certainly you need to think about limiting the vendor's ability to arbitrarily increase prices. You want to put reasonable caps within the contract, and you want to think about things like future options for discounts on products that maybe you don't need today, but you might need in the future. You also want to contemplate what am I doing with software, or what can I do with software or users that I'm not actually utilizing? Can I swap them out or exchange them for software or users that I actually need? All of those things need to be addressed in the contract. And then finally, termination. Termination in the context of a SaaS agreement is a hot button issue. Vendors are almost always going to push back on you having the ability to terminate for convenience, because they don't want you to enter into a 3 to 5 year agreement where they have provided you with substantive discounts off of the list price of that technology solution for you just to be able to walk away. They're going to give you, certainly I would think, the ability to terminate that agreement, but they're going to want to have impose maybe a termination fee on you, so that if you walk away from the agreement in the first year of a 3-year term, you're on the hook for a portion of the fees that would be due as if you had gone through the entire term of that agreement. You want to make sure that you've got the flexibility to get out of that agreement and minimize the likelihood that you're going to have to pay any kind of exorbitant fees. And like I said, the time to negotiate these things is when you're when you've got leverage and when you're reviewing that contract, and certainly before you've signed the agreement, because once you've signed it, you have no options at all. If you're in the process of reviewing a contract or negotiating a contract with the vendor, and you've got any questions about that process and any issues that are coming up, we'd certainly love to talk to you about that. Feel free to reach out to us at taflaw.com. Happy to help you and review those contracts and give you an understanding of the lay of the land.